End-all game. He backs away, dismisses Parliament. Shortly thereafter, his favorite, the Duke of Buckingham, is assassinated. We don't know what kind of a relationship they really had. I don't think he had a relationship with the Duke as his dad did. But the Duke was hated by everybody else. Not because he was homosexual, but because he was very dishonest and had real issues with, in terms of dealing with authority. He really, he sort of came out of nowhere. At the same time, he was, I would say, part of more nouveau riche than he was old standard wealthy noble. Very great questions as to where he actually got his title as Duke, how he got it. But nonetheless, it didn't matter. He's still one of these individuals who I think just rubbed people the wrong way. Now, he is Lord of the Admiralty at the same time. Lord of the Admiralty meant, this probably wouldn't have meant nothing had he not been the king's favorite. He's Lord of the Admiralty. And he got into a very costly collision with the Dutch fleet across the Channel. The English lost the battle, but a lot of it due to incompetence of the Duke of Buckingham, who should have been in charge of no one's navy, we now know. He wasn't really qualified, but he's a favorite. So remember, he received all this money from King James when they found, when the East India Company was established in India and in Persia. All the money they made in the first year, which was a vast amount, was given to the king and to the Duke of Buckingham. This Buckingham deserved nothing. So he's very much disliked. And after the failure of the campaign against the Dutch, which they thought was just horribly handled, horribly planned, horribly executed, he was assassinated on that one. We still don't know who the assassin was. That's really was the end of things. After the petition of right and assassination of the Duke, you have now Charles I does not call Parliament again for 11 years. If I don't have to hear them, then I don't have to worry about them. They're not going to criticize me. But doesn't mean they don't have the resentments, they do. But during that time, the resentment begins to grow again when he appoints a new foreign minister, that is Wentworth, and also Archbishop Laud as the Archbishop of Canterbury. And I think what Laud did was probably more insulting to just about everybody, equal opportunity insulter, than anybody. Because he revised the Book of Common Prayer, and he did it in a way that appeared to be very, and I say appears to be very Catholic. But keep in mind, when I say Catholic, it looks Catholic, it's not Catholic. It is an emphasis on good works in the church, a watering down of all the statements dealing with predestination, that people are part of the elect, that there is an elite sort of elect out there, a real sort of playing down of the Calvinism in the church and in Parliament, but especially in church. And so what he's going to do is Bishop Laud rewrites the Book of Common Prayer, and he does a very strange thing. He tries to enforce it in Scotland. And in Scotland there is a rebellion by the Scots Presbyterian Church. After all, they are what? They're Calvinists. just as the Puritans in Parliament in the Church of England are Calvinists. They're very close theologically. But why he would hit England, or why he would hit Scotland first, I'm not sure. I've gone over that question a lot of times. I don't understand it. The Scots formed a covenant, and the group there's hundreds of them that signed it. It's called the Covenanters, mostly around the area of Dunfermline, Scotland. There's still the memorial there with all the signatures that all have been inscribed, this time in stone. I went to church with a little guy when I was young. He was a Scottish wrestler. By this time I met him, he was already in his 60s, I guess. And Andy Cowan. And he came from Dunfermline. And he would always talk about the Covenanters, all the Covenanters. I didn't know what he was talking about. I didn't have no clue. But, you know, the people who grew up in that environment, that is, you know, this is like centuries ago, they still remember the Covenanters. And so, this is important, this is a stand. Here we stand, we can do no other. It's like Martin Luther at Worms. Here I stand, we can do no other, and they stand up against them. Well, not only do they stand up against them, they invade the country, they invade England. And, you know, Parliament's going, they can't believe it, because the next thing is, Laud tries to enforce the Book of Common Prayer with all the free will versus predestination editing in it on the Church of England, on the Puritans of the Church of England, who said, hell no. So what you have is a union now between the Scots Presbyterians, who invade the country, and a union with the Puritans in the English Parliament, who said, we're not going to send an army against the Scots. Why should we? We're together in this thing against this crazy king who's doing that stuff. Wentworth was arrested and executed. Laud goes down in history as probably the most unpopular archbishop that ever existed in England. But he doesn't represent, remember something, he does not represent Calvinism. He does not represent the Catholic Church. He's not a Catholic. What does he represent? Anybody?
Armenians?
The Armenian, not Armenian. Arminian, it's Arminian position. And that was my fault. So, but it's which means that their emphasis is far more on free will as opposed to predestination. Dead set against the Calvinists. And they also represent an economic factor because they are basically lower middle class. You know, it's out of the lower middle class a century later, or maybe it's about a century and a half later. Out of that is going to come the Methodist Church out of the Church of England. Methodists also represent that lower middle class and represent a lot in the emphasis on good works and so forth. So they're very much alike, but have slightly different roots. Well, the king now has to call Parliament. He has no options. He doesn't have any money. He doesn't have an army. His popular cause has definitely left him. So, no army, no backing, no money, and he can't get any. He's forced to call Parliament. Now, you look at the situation, you have all of this buildup of animosity against this king, who, by the way, is a very obdurate monarch. I mean, you can't tell him anything. The Stuarts were, I think, never able to accept much in the way of criticism, ever. This particular king had a penchant for, whatever anybody said. If he disagreed with it, he was liable to try and do the same old thing again, try to have you arrested. Already you have a bill against this. But he simply never knows that it's time to back down. The days that you're thinking you live in are over. They're long past. That's another story. He was far tougher on his opponents in terms of arguing with them than Charles ever was. And this really becomes a hallmark of the Stuarts. They just never learn a damn thing. I never saw a series of kings that could not learn anything. And these are the Stuarts. So, calls Parliament, they immediately, now they can come together, and what's the problem here? What is the problem with calling Parliament? What brings
Old issues come back up.
That's right. Everything comes to a head.
Yeah.
You're gonna give the opposition a forum for deliberation and a forum to attack you. And they have been waiting for a long time. You know, when they're not gathered together, they're not thinking about all these things. But as soon as you get them together, and you've already got problems with invasion, Scottish invasion, Archbishop Laud, Wentworth, all out there doing their thing, everything, aggravating everybody. You call Parliament, and what are you gonna get? You're gonna get you got a major headache. So, this is exactly what happens. But Parliament begins to go beyond this. They don't like his decisions. They may not like him, but that's not the problem. They don't like his decisions. They don't like his appointments, Wentworth or Laud. They don't like his ability now to be able to raise an army, because if he can raise an army, he'll raise it and he'll use it on them, and they know that. There is no army right now. I mean, very small detachments. England hasn't been in a war for a long time, no need for a major military force. But suddenly, it now becomes a race against time. If Parliament continues to meet, and this continues to be heard, there's enough supporters in Parliament, not a majority, but enough in Parliament and in the church, that will rally to his cause and help him raise an army and pay for the army. They'll raise the funds. And if we let that happen, if we allow the king's prerogative to continue and he raises the army, we know the first thing he's going to do is use it against us. That's exactly what these Puritans are thinking. And they're not entirely wrong. He probably would have done just that. Now, same period, you have the question, well, who has the right to raise an army? There's no question. There is no question. There's never been a question. Parliament has never had the right to raise an army in the history of England. They don't have that right. They don't have the right to appoint the administration. They don't have the right to choose the state officials. That is, Lord of the Admiralty, Foreign Affairs. They don't have the right to choose the Chancery, Finances, Judiciary, any of it. That's not their right. They don't have the right to choose the bishops either. That's all, always, has always. This is, keep in mind, this has always been, and the words are exact, the king's prerogative. So when you have Parliament now up and beginning to challenge these things, and saying the king, we're going to beat the king to the punch. We're going to appoint the new ministers. We're going to raise an army first, even though it's desperation time, even though it's a matter of life and death. If this king raises an army before they do, they know they're dead. But at the same time, if this king, this is the only way it's ever been done. It doesn't matter how desperate you are, you have no right under any aspect of English law to raise a damn army as Parliament. Parliament never has. It's never been within their jurisdiction to do it. So right away, you're not just violating the law. That's one thing. But we said, as I said before, you're violating tradition, and one of the great, I'd say, strengths of the English system is the fact that tradition means something. And you don't just go your own frickin' merry way. You do your thing just because, you know, you may have all the just causes in the world, but this is real. I mean, this is absolutely revolutionary if you do it. And Parliament decides to strike first and do it and raise an army. They're going to raise an army to stop the Scots, even though they're actually more in sympathy with them. But they're going to raise an army. But I don't think it's just to stop the Scots. The army they're raising, basically, because the Scots are going to join these guys, They're raising an army to stop the Scots in order to raise an army to stop Charles before he can raise an army against them. So you immediately have a major cleavage in Parliament. Those that represent the center of England and the south and the east, I'm sorry, the south and the west, largely represent rural England, with some pockets of towns and cities, but largely a rural area, largely conservative, largely royalist. They support the king. You've got these, but you've got pockets all over the place on both sides, so it's not an even deal here. But so the royalists coming into the fray are going to have a very, again, first year of this collision by 43 and 44, collision period. They're going to be challenging. They're going to have some major victories. They have the horse. They have horses. Most of these guys are good cavalrymen. They don't have much in the way of infantry, but they're not worried about it the first year. Now, those that support the Parliament's called to raise an army. It's a little oblique who they are. You have, first of all, those that support what I would call the Presbyterians. They want a constitutional monarchy with Parliament ruling the country, but with a king. With Parliament ruling the country, but with a king. Presbyterians. Puritans can do without the king. Their talk is basically Parliament can rule the country in its own fashion. That's never happened. The last group, without going into too much definition here, would be understood as the apocalyptic group. Apocalyptic, we hear the word used a lot today in documentaries and in end of the world kind of stuff that shows up on all these wacky documentaries. You know, the Mayan calendar was apocalyptic because they were supposed to perish in December 21st, 2012. Didn't happen. But it's on every night. You see stuff. Nostradamus, revisited. Like, I don't want to revisit Nostradamus. You know, the world's bleak enough. The people are they're feeling very itchy about, end of days kind of stuff. That somehow there is the great apocalyptic ending is coming. All the word apocalyptic really means is to reveal. It's a revelation. That's where we get the last book of the Bible, is known as the Apocalypsis in Greek. It means revelation of a revealed mystery. But basically, it has a connotation that these are bad days coming up, and that there's a judgment of God out there awaiting everybody. And the Presbyterians and the Puritans are super into this stuff for sure. And there's a slew of them with each with a little different take on it. The apocalyptic guys see this upcoming conflict in terms of God versus the devil. In terms of the forces of God, meaning the Puritan forces and the Presbyterian forces are against the evil king who represents what? Basically the forces of demons, the devil, all the bad things. And so you have these apocalyptic writers writing for them, like John Milton, John Bunyan. These are guys that are, read what they had to say. These are not guys these are not dime novelists. These are very profound movers and shakers of religious ideas. Now, the apocalyptic crew, by the way, the third, sort of believe that what they're going to bring about is ultimately some kind of a commonwealth of God established by the Puritans. Commonwealth of God. Whatever that means. So you got three big groups out there. Later emerging in the middle of this is going to be Oliver Cromwell and his new model army. They really stand for pretty much the second group. Calvinists, no king, ruled by Parliament. He hasn't shown himself yet. Nobody knows what that's going to mean. But within a year, he's raised an army, a substantial army from the south, from the southeast. London and the industrial areas, with pockets of resistance. I remember when I was in Winchester, I remember visiting my friend Roger Richardson. In his home, he had a condo in a place called Oliver's Battery. It was, which is right there. And that's named after Oliver Cromwell. Had a artillery battery there, which he was going to blow the shit out of Winchester. Now it's a subdivision. I love that. I love real estate. Come into real estate. Forget history. Okay. By the way, let me check one more time. William Park Hoffman. Oh my God, that's you!
Yep.
Save yourself from getting F. Get this thing that I will. One more thing, while the announcement time is rich right now. The exam for this class is going to be Monday the 9th at 10:30. Monday the 9th at 10:30. Okay? Yeah. All right, any questions? We started looking at some of this stuff on, again, when I was looking at showing the film. We're going to show the remainder of that piece by Simon Schama, and then I'm going to show into the actual battle itself on the English Civil War. Again, it's the most studied bit of English history. In terms of percentages, about 70% of all PhDs are written on this subject. The rest of it, I guess they think is dull. I can't imagine anything else being that dull. It's great. Okay. Now we have two major battles, 44 and 46. Marston Moor, M-A-R-S-T-O-N, Moor, M-O-O-R, 1644. It was an overwhelming Puritan victory. But the new model army is bringing something into it which has not been there before, and that is a regimented discipline. When these guys go into battle, they're not all on horseback, very few of them are. The Puritan forces were organized as infantry with long pikes. They look like something out of the phalanx, Macedonian phalanx of Alexander the Great. They have their hair, all their uniforms look alike, their haircuts all alike, the round tonsure. They have the pikes. They have plenty of artillery. They have units of this group that march to muffled drums. And as they go into battle, they sing hymns of faith. I can't imagine just how joyous those might be. With the drum beats behind them. You could just roam. It sounds like, you could just visualize the Roman army moving in against the Goths or something with this rumble sound, this muffled sound, muffled sound, muffled sound. It scares the shit out of you. Because the royalists, according to the tradition, would always go in for flanking movements, would encircle them, try to break the middle. They couldn't do it. Why? Because these guys are marching like a band of, it's like a living, moving porcupine with all these huge pikes sticking out. Pikes are a great instrument. Sometimes 10 to 12 feet long, iron tipped. Marching in a battle, cavalry charge, and you just wait till they hit you, and you just broil them over. That's exactly how the English won against the French back in the 3 times in the 100 Years' War. French cavalry attacks against English pikemen, English bowmen, but it's the pikemen that held their ground and just impaled the French cavalry. These guys impaled the Royalist cavalry. Sometimes you would have in front of the various legions some guy preaching a message from, he's getting a revelation from God, he's preaching out there. This saith the Lord God, you're gonna, we will win today, we have ultimate. Then all you need is a storm to come up and you know the guy's right. Yeah, shit, can we get out of here? You know, you can just see the fear, and you can see the faith on the guys that are representing the Parliament. So they represent it's very apocalyptic in its look and its feel. It's the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven versus the Antichrist, the king. King is not portrayed as the Antichrist. He's portrayed as the Antichrist because he's portrayed as a defender, which he was not, a defender of Catholicism, which he was not. But you've got to remember, in good Protestant tradition, going back to Luther, who was the Antichrist? Anybody? What's the Lutheran take on it? What's the Calvinist take on who's the Antichrist? The Catholic Church and the Pope. So they're being painted as papists. They're being painted as those representing the Pope, forces of the Antichrist. That's how kind of weird and silly this thing got. But deadly, deadly serious. And singing the hymns and beating the drums and marching for, you just knew your day was cooked. No matter how good your swords were, no matter how many guys you had, you don't have the facility to stand up against this. They had moral forces on their side. They thought it was, they believed it, and that's all it took. So you have Marston Moor is a pretty overwhelming Puritan victory. This is where Cromwell really shines with the discipline of his new model army. Battle of Naseby, Naseby, I'm probably saying it wrong, Naseby. I'm sorry, 1645, another one-sided battle. And ultimately, this war, which has three phases, I'm not going to go into all three phases, you can read about the phases. This war is going to come to an end with the king arrested in 46, some say not till 47. He's going to be held by parliamentary forces until he goes on trial. But here is what the deal was. Once this war is over, and you have 750,000 people dead, you know just how vicious this thing was. Because while we're talking about some of the major battles, didn't talk about very much, but talked about them. There are battles going on all over the country constantly. So a lot of people are being killed, a lot of innocent people are dying. Okay, now, what emerges here as the king is kept waiting, there's offers made to the king by parliamentary leaders. Let Parliament dictate policy. Let the king stay on the throne. Just shut up. We'll preserve the monarchy, but Parliament will have the authority. The king will be a figurehead. He is given repeated offers of this. And what does he say? No, absolutely not. My father didn't come out or take over this country to become a peasant. To be given orders by the commoners, to be given orders by Parliament. Since when do you have the authority to take over my prerogatives? He's going to argue this. I mean, I don't know if he's just stupid or just really stubborn or really standing for his prerogatives or what. I don't know how much he really knows here. But he's got to know this is not an argument that's going to go his way. He has lost the war. His forces have surrendered. They've already gone back to their homes. There are still some in Parliament who support him, but in the meantime comes a series of debates in Parliament to discuss the future of the king, and these are called the Putney debates, P-U-T-N-E-Y, the Putney debates. And this is they're gonna make this argument during the debates about, this is where it comes to Parliament itself. These are the debates, official debates, they're in the record. By the way, these are all in print. English parliamentary debates. We have them on, we can pick them up on Google through microfilm from Oxford, but the thing is they're in print in England. You can still, I mean, in fact, some of our really good libraries here still have English parliamentary, and the parliamentary debates, the parliamentary record and so forth. It's all in print and it's all available if you go to the right library. I don't know how much of it's online, but some of it is online because they're doing more and more of that. I remember going through parliamentary debates in the 1800s, looking about debates in London, in Parliament, about going to war in Egypt in 1882. And Hansard's parliamentary, Hansard was the publisher, Hansard, Hansard's parliamentary debates. Good stuff. I mean, you see all the arguments. These were tougher, I think, to resurrect because they're all done originally on quill and ink. Stuff fades, it runs, and all. It's tough to read it. Some have been reprinted in type. So, but it's going to check. You know, when you check out the original sources, which is not impossible to do, and I'm sure there's a lot more available than when I first started this stuff. And you can get it. You can get some of these things online. It's just absolutely phenomenal to read it. Because you begin to pick up the nuances of the debates, the nuances of the arguments. And Hansard is the primary source document for anything parliamentary, for any number of these debates. Hansard's parliamentary debate. The other are the parliamentary papers, and those are big volumes. They're like this, sort of like this, and they're about 500 pages each. They're cost prohibitive to have them printed. But the original editions are available. You can still get those. Some of that also online. So check it out, see what you can find, just to pick up on some of this stuff. It's amazing just how really, when you read this stuff, you get a sense of it like you're there. That's the difference between that and reading a secondary source or going to a lecture or watching a film. You read this stuff, you read the real debates, you're going, God, this is a lot different than I envisioned. It just sort of, it's a wake-up call. And it's really good, it's wonderful. The other thing that wouldn't apply to this period, it's going to come later, is a series produced by Edmund Burke, considered the father of modern conservatism, English author. Burke was a philosopher as well. He was a real conservative, and he edited what's called the Annual Register, parliamentary source for anything dealing with English history as well as global history, starting in the late 18th century, about the time of the American Revolution, French Revolution, and so forth. We'll come to those periods in a little bit. But these are great. These are the great primary sources, and of course, anything you can get on the old London Times, wonderful stuff. A lot of the Times has been first microfilmed and now online, so it's available. Our library's been very slow to get some of these things, but I think now we've sort of moved into it. Okay. Presbyterians and Cavaliers, however, during the middle of these debates, formed an opinion that the king was very definitely under threat. And if he didn't get his act together, he was probably going to be executed. This is a very stubborn king. He refused all compromise. He refused to be a king in name only. And ultimately, the strange situation developed where royalists, king supporters, And some of the Scots Presbyterians got together. They're deadly enemies, but they have one thing in common. They both support the king. Even the Scots Presbyterians that don't like his policies still support him. After all, this is Charles I. He's a Scot, son of James I Stuart. This is, I mean, he's a Scot. He's one of us. We got to support it. We can't let things just override everything and execute this guy, because that's what it's going to come to. They know it, so they engineer a plot to kidnap him. Oliver Cromwell finds out about this plot and is able to prevent it. This is in 1648, organizes an attack on the Royalists and the Scots. He wins. And then he sets up a government. It's called the Rump Parliament, R-U-M-P, Rump Parliament, 1648. This is going to run the country. This is just a small portion of the parliament that he feels he can trust. Not all of the parliament. Strange question about Oliver Cromwell. What in the hell is he doing, and what is he thinking? Where is he going? We know where he finally did go, but did anybody at the time have figured it out? He's going to emerge, what? As virtual king of the country. But he's in power now by grace of the Parliament and no other. But he doesn't trust parliamentary government. He sort of sees himself there by some kind of divine right. So he dismisses the bulk of Parliament and keeps a handful of loyal supporters that will support his vision. And this vision is supported by the Rump Parliament. To keep everything in close order as much as possible, he's going to execute the king as quickly as possible. And I think for sure, there's no question, he's doing this out of fear. What I want you to do is read in your little booklet on Oliver Cromwell, the little blue book. Read the various versions of him. Get yourself an opinion, and ask yourself, why did he execute the king? Did he have to execute the king? What's the matter with just leaving the king in prison? Anybody?
If he eventually gets free, that he'd be a rallying point for more resistance.
It's always the case, isn't it? That's why they killed the Russian Tsar and all his kids. You're a rallying point for the opposition. That's why they let there was no Louis the 17th, but there would have been. He was alive. There was a king, Louis the 16th, had a kid. And during the French Revolution, the revolutionaries got a hold of him, killed him, executed him. People didn't even know he ever existed. There's no mention of Louis the 17th by anybody, but there was one, and he's eliminated. You can't. This is why, way back, Augustus decided to take Cleopatra back and change her, see that or see her dead, because he's a rallying point for opposition. I mean, there's so much of this in history, and there's no doubt this king, with his mouth especially, was a rallying point. Mary Queen of Scots is a rallying point for opposition against Queen Elizabeth. So here it is again. He wouldn't shy from doing this. So the first execution of a king in English history, the only execution, January 30th, 1649. He lived a long time after being captured. 3.5 years.
What was the
January 30th, 1649. And a Puritan republic is proclaimed. 1550 to 1560, first part of this is called sometimes the Commonwealth, 1550 to 1553. And then there virtually is no parliament ruling. After 1553, Oliver Cromwell is declared the Lord High Protector of the land, not king, not leader of parliament, but Lord High Protector of the land.
Don't you mean 1650?
What did I say?
1500.
Oh, you know, hey, write down not what I said. Write down what you think I should have said. Right, Jonathan? Right. See, Kyle. Yes.
So did Cromwell think of this like super cool name all by himself? Did Parliament give it to him?
The Rump Parliament gave it to him,
Okay.
as far as we know. But he wouldn't take the title king. They just got rid of a king. It's not a good idea. But he is a king, virtually. What it tells you is that nobody in charge knows where this is going. So he becomes Lord High Protector in 1653. He's going to live to 1658 with not a clue about what they're going to do. Nobody thought this out. So what this period is known for is one of a lot of repression. This is the establishment of this is the concrete realization, according to the apocalyptic pamphleteers. This is the realization of the kingdom of God. It's under Oliver Cromwell. Kingdom of God. That's what the Puritans said in Boston. And they came there in 1630. They proclaimed their establishment of a church state in Boston, kind of a commonwealth, but they called it the city on the hill, which they see as a fulfillment of the kingdom of God. These guys are serious about this stuff. And you can kind of look at where church state, when it runs together, no separation of church and state, exactly what that gets you. It's a strange affair. Every law that's decreed is automatically, by virtue of the fact of this being no separation of church and state, every law becomes what? A divine law. So what they imposed was a whole slew of what we call blue laws. Blue laws are basically no entertainment, no revelry, no picnics, no chicken fights, no puppet shows, circuses, theater, anything, nothing on Sundays. No drinking. You can't get a drink anywhere. By the way, that's going to kill a lot of people. That's going to really churn rebellion, if anything I know. Okay. Then they had specific laws aimed at what you mentioned before against the theater, to shut it down altogether, not just based on Sundays. Any kind of entertainment that's out there is going to be legislated out of existence. By the Puritan fanaticism for fulfilling God's law. And where are they getting this? What is their major emphasis? There's no question. The major emphasis of the Puritans in Parliament is the Old Testament. What's the theme of the Old Testament, if you want to sort of get it right in the gut? Thou shalt not. Doesn't matter what, just thou shalt not. Don't ask. It has that flavor to it. There's nothing much in this that smacks of anything New Testament Christianity. But this has been the problem with Puritan sort of mentality and the Puritan ethos for a long, long time. But they really don't have, they may have won some battles, but they didn't really ever get a mandate to rule the country. Not really. Unless you consider winning the battles, the mandate. They have no clue as to where any of this is going. And they are deadly afraid of bringing back Parliament again, because much of part of what had been Parliament, now dismissed, called back to, again, they're going to be against a lot of what Cromwell's doing. They don't like what he's doing. They don't see the vision. Just a series of very repressive laws. I mean, it's not a place I would want to live at the time. That's why I say you get a very different feeling from the England of Elizabeth to the England of the Stuarts with all this going on. You wouldn't even know it's the same country. Very, very different. Okay, now, any questions about any of this stuff so far? But when you go back to England, take it from an They offer tons of historians. I'm sure they teach this stuff. Just get the take on it, though.
Yeah.
You should. Are you a history major?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, feel sorry for him. Okay. Okay. So now, the blue laws are in effect. No theater. No chicken fights. I don't mind that, but you know. And then Cromwell dies without a successor. There's no mechanism of succession set up here to who replaces them and where it goes. So what is this thing? What kind of government is this? It's a republic of some kind, with the Lord High Protector as the head. Well, what is a republic? They were never looking to establish anything like this. Nobody had a clue it was going to go this far. It just went way overboard. Everybody's at fault here. And so when Cromwell dies in 58, he sort of halfway designated his son to take over, but his son really didn't want to be Lord High Protector. He says, I was just happened to be his kid. I don't want to jump into this because nobody's happy. Nobody's satisfied with this thing. The one thing he accomplished, well, there's a couple of things that he did accomplish during his rule. Number one, he really did unite all the British Isles under a single rule. I mean, really did it. He fought a 5-year war in Ireland, drew Ireland under the British headship of Cromwell, under the Republic. It becomes part of the Republic. They had fought against him. Catholics fought against him. He killed thousands in Ireland. Same process of elimination as he did when he fought the Royalists. Thousands died in Ireland at the hands of Cromwell. He's not exactly, he's not a birthday gift to the Irish people. They hate him. They to this day hate him. Fought the Scots, same thing. Brought them under. He did what no English king has ever been able to do. And that is, he unites all of the British Isles under a single rule. It's under the Republic. Yes?
So now are they the United Kingdom or Great Britain?
It's simply the Republic.
Just the Republic?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
We're not talking about United Kingdom. There's no kingdom.
Okay.
There's no king. It's just a republic, and it's it's effective in the sense that the Stuarts were going to try to unite everybody together. Okay? As under Crown Union auspices. The Irish weren't too much in favor of any of this because they're a whole different ethos. Period. But he drags them all in. Nobody's going to fight Cromwell. Cromwell is tough.
What was his outlook on the French invading or taking back?
He didn't really get into the French issue at all, as far as I know. If he did, I don't know about it. But what he does deal with, because he sees them as a mortal enemy at sea, and commercial rivals were the Dutch. And he gets into what is called the Second Anglo-Dutch War with Dutch forces, and major collision at sea. He knocks the crap out of them, and from the Dutch he seizes Jamaica and Dunkirk. So now we have Jamaica coming in, and the Dutch didn't quite. Well, they fight 3 wars with the Dutch during this century, and these are both Protestant powers. They're not worried about the Spanish. They're not worried about the French. They're fighting the Dutch. Dutch are the great enemies at sea, and so the Dutch are going to simply back off, and he's going to really he's going to steal, not steal, actually that's not the right word, but he is going to take several of their colonies once he, and then ultimately New Amsterdam is going to be seized with a name change. It becomes New York. It belonged to the Dutch. That whole upper Hudson Valley, full of Dutch families to this day, very wealthy Dutch families. Van Dykes, the Renskillers and so forth, the Roosevelts are all wealthy upper Hudson Valley people, upstate New York. Still there. Knickerbocker tales from the old days of New York, it's all still there. Originally Dutch. So he takes it. The Dutch won't bounce back from this. And ultimately, there's going to be a major extension of other colonies under Cromwell. So it's sort of Cromwell Incorporated. You know, you really get that sense that this is a business. Religion ceases to be a big issue with Cromwell himself. He is not a pamphleteer. He is not a visionary in terms of religion. He enforces a few of the laws, but basically, he's just a sort of a secular tough guy that used religion to gain power. Probably. But if you can find a different story about him in that little book and come up with a different interpretation, or use anything you can on Cromwell, just try to figure it out. I think English people had a horrible time trying to figure out Cromwell, where he was going. They didn't know. They never experienced anything like it, and it happened so fast, they didn't know what to do. So let's turn to those glorious days of yesteryear one more time and take a look. Is my man Simon Schama can tell the tale like nobody else. By the way, I forgot to point this out. The Civil War shows on this map, by the way, and you can kind of see. The Royalist territory is all the pink area here. And then the yellow is all basically the support of Cromwell, which is most of the cities, and of course, most of the very successful parts of the east coast of England, which is on the Channel, where trade took place. And you have the English Navy station, but you also have all of the trade coming from the continent controlled by the Puritans. So this meant that the Royalist cause really did not have a chance.
No, it didn't.